our next speaker, Paul Zykofsky, who is an associate with AIA, directs the local government commission's programs related to land use and transportation planning, community design, and health and the built environment. In the past 17 years, he has worked with over 200 communities to improve conditions for infill development, walking, bicycling, and transit. In the last 10 years, he's helped facilitate design charrettes, and I'll let him describe that word, in over 30 communities. He has worked in collaboration with the State Department of Public Health, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and the California Endowment to promote physical activity by improving design of the built environment. I'm not going to read your whole bio, but he's a frequent presenter at local, regional, and national conferences, born and raised in Mexico and fluent in Spanish.
Buenas tardes. Well, it's great to be here. I think if we were in LA or San Francisco, the room would be half empty by now because everybody would be leaving to beat the traffic. So it's nice to be in a county where that isn't an issue. I want to echo the point that Dick made at the end of his talk, which is to say that you guys are doing, guys, gals, everybody here are doing a great job on these issues. There aren't many counties that are doing this much. I will throw in one little caveat, and that is to question how many traffic engineers or transportation planners we have in the room today. Any show of hands? Okay, we have 1, 2. Okay, and that's a segment of the professional world that I encourage you to do more to engage. A lot of what gets built out there is built based on what those professions do. So it's really important to have them at the table. Supervisor Patterson already talked about the Local Government Commission. For those, we're not very well known. We're one of those organizations that operates under the radar. We're a nonprofit organization based in Sacramento. Our members are folks that work in local government throughout the state. We actually have this weird name of commission. People sometimes think, well, aren't you a state commission? Well, we actually started out as a state commission in the late 70s working on solar energy issues. We were called the Solar Cal Local Government Commission, hence the name. And a few years later, when the commission was going to be shut down, the elected officials who had gathered under this commission to exchange ideas and challenge one another to do more on solar energy basically created the nonprofit, which exists till today, over 30-some years. And we started working on healthy communities back in the early 90s. We just didn't know that that's what we were doing. We then thought we were just planning better communities, more livable communities. The impacts on health and how it relates to health really didn't become apparent. I mean, we all sort of in the back of our minds probably thought, yeah, this somehow ties into health. But it wasn't until we started meeting people like Dick Jackson at CDC, Rich Killingsworth, who was at CDC, Ann Seeley, who was at the Department of Health Services here, and talked about these issues, as well as with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, who started exploring this issue in the late 90s, that we realized we were working on healthy communities. The Ahwahnee principles were first developed by a group of architects and planners who were basically trying to create communities that were walkable, bicycle-friendly, transit-friendly, that had a mix of housing types, housing for, diverse housing, as Dick talked about, with a central focus where people could walk, feel comfortable being out. They were called the Ahwahnee Principles because they were first presented at a conference at the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite back in 1991. And based on that, we created the Center for Livable Communities, which I was hired to direct in 1995. And we've seen many cities and counties adopt these types of policies and ideas into their planning documents over the years now. Since 2001, we've organized a national conference in partnership with US EPA and other agencies called the New Partners for Smart Growth. And one of the reasons it's called New Partners for Smart Growth was that when we first took over this conference in 2001, we already were bringing in 10, 15, 20% of the participants were from public health. Folks like you working in public health who recognize how important the built environment is to the health of our communities. One of the first things we did actually working with health, the health department in California, this is back in 99, 2000, was develop these fact sheets on designing walkable communities, on safe routes to school, which was just then beginning to become a program of our Department of Transportation. And a lot of what we've done really is to address environments like this. There is one person you can see in this photograph who's not in a car. My friend Dan Burden, who took this photo, says that he went back 3 days later and this person was still standing there. And it's sad but true. A lot of our communities have streets like this, streets that really only accommodate somebody in a car. And this is what I think all of us recognize we need to change. We need to create those environments where everybody can get around, and the whole movement around complete streets really has helped move that along. Of course, you know, the issues with health are significant. Everybody's talked about that. One of the statistics that wasn't mentioned, which I like to remind people and bring up, is this study from CDC of a few years ago, telling us that 1 in 3 children born in 2000 can be expected to get diabetes in their lifetime. I asked one of my friends who used to work at Department of Health Services with Dick, what was it a generation or two ago? And he was telling me it was closer to 1 in 50, just one generation ago, 1 in 50. So this is really, as everybody today has mentioned, it's about the next generation. It's about our children. It's about what's going to happen if we don't reverse this obesity epidemic. On the plus side, I should tell you that there is, you know, aside from we've heard about, you know, what CDC is doing today, we've heard about what the First Lady, Michelle Obama, is doing on this. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has had a major effort on now for 10 years to reverse the childhood obesity epidemic by 2015. We are one of the organizations that's been funded by them over the years to work on that. We've got the California Endowment. There are a lot of organizations and groups that are putting you know, significant effort into doing this, but it's not going to be easy. We're in a tough situation. I had some slides in here that I actually took out, and I'm going to just reference them for those of you who want to look this report up. It's called F as in Fat. It was issued just a few months ago by the Trust for America's Health, and in it, what they do is they extrapolate 30 years or 20 years into the future, and have some of those same maps that you saw today showing percentage of folks that are obese in each state. They take that out to 2030, and then also look at what would happen if we just reduced those amounts by 5%, if we reduced the BMI by 5%. And I mean, both maps are somewhat scary because the percentage of population that would be obese in 20 years is still very significant. But just that 5% reduction, you see the difference. You also see the difference in health cost savings, which they also include in their report. And one of the things that early on when I started working on this, one of the folks I worked with gave me this chart saying, just telling people you have to go out and be physically active has not worked very well over the years. This is from study back in the 80s and 90s, showing that the percentage of Americans that get routine physical activity has not changed that much. And this is back in the days when people were being told, go out and jog. I remember my parents getting into the jogging craze, in the 70s. And really what it comes down to is we have to create the environments where we can get this physical activity as part of our daily routines, where we can also get access to healthy food easily. And back in 99, the Journal of the American Medical Association was telling us already we need to create those environments that permit walking or bicycling, where as part of our daily routines, people are doing this. Only, if the number of people who will, drive their cars to the gym and get on the treadmill, or go to the gym and go up the escalator to the gym to get on the treadmill, is fairly static. We're not seeing, at least I haven't seen any recent reports showing a change in that. It still remains at about that 20% level. For most of us, including myself, it's being able to walk to work, walk to, go out and walk for lunch, have places to walk on weekends, all of that makes a difference in whether people are going to be physically active. And again, the good news is we don't, it doesn't have to be a major sweat. I think that's been mentioned earlier today. 30 minutes a day, 150 minutes a week of, moderate physical activity. You can break it up into segments of 10 minutes is what the doctors tell us is needed. Now, if we want to keep the weight off, as I think Dick was mentioning, we probably need a little bit more than 30 minutes, but that'll start. Now, typically, I go through a lot of this, but you've heard a lot about the land use changes. But these are some of the elements of the built environment that will create those walkable communities. A good mix of land uses, where destinations are close to where people live and work. A certain amount of density and compactness. We don't like to use the D word, so don't use it. Just talk about compact, walkable environments. But if you want to have retail and schools close to where people live, we can't spread out the way we have over the last 50, 60 years. We have to intensify development. We have to fill in parts of our communities that were left vacant, so those destinations are close enough. We need to put buildings back at the back of the sidewalk and stop putting parking lots in front of the buildings and have good site design. We need well-connected street networks. You know, pedestrians walk at a rate of about 3 miles per hour. If you have to go out of direction of travel to make that trip, you're just going to give up and get in your car. So having well-connected street networks and trails make it easier and possible for people to walk. And of course, street design, streets that have space for bicyclists, that feel comfortable, where people can get out and walk. All of that is key. I'm going to refer to a committee that I was on a few years ago, put together by the Institute of Medicine, that looked at local government actions to prevent childhood obesity. And since I work a lot with local governments, I want to just remind everybody how important, and we've had that discussion about, well, is government getting into our lives too much? The opposite. The government needs to be at the table on this. They have to be proactive. This was a committee that included academics, researchers, folks in public health. Let's see, who else was on here? We had economists. It was a very interesting process to go through and discuss and debate these issues and come up with a set of recommendations. But the bottom line was that we all agreed that the role of local government was significant, that it's uniquely positioned to create those environments, especially for children. Our role was really to address childhood obesity. That it already has experience in promoting children's health. We see especially county health departments doing that. And of course, through the control of land use, and that's where our work with local government has been key. Local governments have that preeminent control over what happens within their boundaries and how development occurs and how we build and where we build. Local governments have a lot of control over many aspects of our life. I'll go through these very quickly. There were a set of recommendations on the healthy eating side, and then there were also some on the active living side. On healthy eating, the 6 top ones, and there were, I think, over 60 recommendations overall, but sort of the top 6 were attracting supermarkets and grocery stores to underserved neighborhoods, requiring menu labeling in chain restaurants, which I'm glad to see is happening more and more now, mandating and implementing strong nutrition standards for foods and beverages in government-run or registered after-school programs. By the way, we were not looking at in-school, at what happened inside school environments. That was sort of another committee that had looked at that. So this was outside the school environment. Adopting building codes to require access to and maintenance of water fountains. We heard about that today again. The importance of having good access to fresh water, safe water. Implementing a tax strategy to discourage consumption of foods and beverages that have minimal nutritional value. We just heard about that again in terms of sugar-sweetened beverages. And developing media campaigns to promote healthy eating and active living. On the active living side, the 6 were fairly straightforward. Plan, build, and maintain a network of sidewalks and street crossings that create a safe, comfortable environment for walking, connects us to destinations. Adopt community policing strategies that improve safety and security of streets and parks. We were also looking, in many cases, at communities with issues with crime and lower income communities. Developing and implementing a Safe Routes to School program, which regrettably our new transportation bill does not do. Build and maintain parks and playgrounds that are safe and attractive for playing and close to residential areas. Establishing joint use of facilities, that is sharing of facilities between schools and local jurisdictions. And again, more and more communities are doing that, sharing play fields, making them available for communities when schools are closed. And instituting policies that mandate minimum play space, physical equipment, and duration of play in preschool or after school and child care programs. We also talked about the fact that, again, one size does not fit all. Every community needs to figure out how to make this work. There's a lot of different types of communities. You've got small towns, rural communities. I've worked in a lot of small towns and rural communities in California, and these issues are addressed in a different way than you would in a larger city like Sacramento, where I live, or San Francisco. There's obviously some key population and geography issues to address. And with that, I wanted to just step back and sort of look at where we've been, because what's happened in the last 10, 12 years on this issue is pretty remarkable. And I'll talk a little bit about that. We started working on this, as I mentioned, in the late 90s, working with the Department of Health Services. They were collaborating with nonprofits. They were trying to support safe routes to school, figuring out how these things could occur. We started seeing the Public Health Institute get involved. They developed a document on general plans and zoning. Safe routes, as I mentioned, was important. And Dick, unfortunately, already put this photo up here, but he didn't point out that he's really serving as security here for the governor, right? Doesn't he look like the Secret Service guy, in the background? But his role, and we really should give him a hand again for everything he's done to make this all happen in California. First, in getting Governor Schwarzenegger to recognize that this wasn't just a personal responsibility issue. And then, I think you were only there for a year, 12 months, 14 months, wasn't a long tenure. But in that short period, I think Dick went out and spoke to probably every county health department about this issue of how the environment impacts health. And we saw county health departments pick up and run with this issue everywhere. This is just a list that I off memory put together back in the late 90s, or late 2000s rather, of places that had done conferences or workshops like this. I mean, it's moved up and down the state. It's amazing to see how this movement has grown. And somebody mentioned Riverside County earlier today, and I think, again, it's one of those counties I like to highlight because it's not one of those places you would think of as being, the real progressive, gung-ho, county on this issue. But they early on recognized how important this was. They started doing health strategic plan back in the early 2000s. One of their goals was creating more livable communities. They started working together between planning department and the health department, and here's the planner, and there's the person for public health. They're doing walk audits. They're talking to the fire department about how to create walkable streets without creating enormous streets where people don't feel comfortable walking because the speeds are too high. They started inviting public health in to review project proposals the way this county is doing, to go on field trips, et cetera. There was a lot that happened, and this is, again, early on. And as a result of that, cities in the county started picking up on this. The city of Coachella, for example, developed a pedestrian plan, their general plan update. Next Tuesday at the California APA, American Planning Association conference, I'm actually moderating a panel of folks from Riverside County, both the county level and some of the cities, who have been working on this now for quite a few years. Other cities, of course, got into the act on this. Funding, really important issue. And I'm trying to sort of, again, get the point across to the planners in the room how important it is to work with public health, because there's a lot of skills that they bring to the table. They can also help bring funding. One of the projects we actually were involved with, this is actually me leading a walk audit in the city, in the town. It's not a city, it's unincorporated, the town of Mecca. How many folks have ever heard of Mecca? Ah, a few, okay. Yeah, that Mecca. No, Mecca, California. I'd never heard of it before we basically worked with public health, developed a proposal, got funding from Caltrans to go in and develop a community plan for this unincorporated community. And, people want this stuff. We had hundreds of people participate over the weekend that we and our planning team and design team spent in Mecca. We had folks identifying the priorities, the issues that needed to be addressed. This is, by the way, a charrette. Somebody mentioned earlier that I do a lot of charrettes. Well, a charrette is one of these several-day intensive processes where you basically, at the end of the 5, 6, 7 days, you have a plan. And people in the community, it's their plan. They're the ones that worked at the tables, drew on the maps, told you what the issues were, and that led to a final plan. I'm also going to mention LA County. Because again, funding is an important part of this. They started a grant program some years ago called the Places Grants. And as a result of that, and they also did conferences and workshops and the kinds of things that have happened here, we've seen some significant things happen throughout the county. Long Beach, how many folks have seen this mural outside of City Hall in Long Beach? You can't read it, but that segment underneath says, Long Beach, the most bicycle-friendly city in America. They've sort of thrown down the gauntlet to other cities like Davis and I guess San Luis Obispo and said, hey, we are going to become the most bicycle-friendly city in the nation. And they've been doing things like, I think, Dick, you mentioned the green, we call these super sharrows. They're a shared lane, that's a shared lane marking, but they also painted a green stripe down the middle of the street to emphasize that this was a street that was being shared with bicyclists. And they did basically the studies that the Federal Highway Administration requires you to do with new experimental techniques like this one. This cost them all of $10,000, by the way, about 2 miles of green paint to put down that stripe. They started putting in more bicycle parking, things that other cities have done. Is San Luis Obispo doing that? You guys must be doing that too. The parklets, the pavement to parks, San Francisco, Portland, tons of cities doing that. And then in the city of LA, they funded something that Dick showed too, this new design manual for living streets. This was a project that was funded by County of Los Angeles Public Health. 10 years ago, that would have been unheard of. You know, public health getting involved and collaborating on something like this would not have been something we would have seen. So to close, I'd like to just emphasize that when you collaborate with public health, there's a lot of benefits from the planning side that you get. And again, I'm coming at it from the planning side. A credible voice, we've heard about, you know, they want that research-driven data to back up what they're going to say. You've got a neutral and skilled convener who's also has a lot more experience than a lot of planners do, at least, in reaching out to underserved communities. We've benefited greatly in collaborating with planning department, with public health departments when we do these charrettes. When we did one in Baldwin Park a few years ago, we had over 200 people show up at the opening workshop because a health agency, a health organization had been working with them on these issues. They provide that public health rationale, bring the health data and scientific rigor. They link you to those underrepresented groups, and again, as I just mentioned, can sometimes bring the funding that's so important to do these projects. I think we're really at a transformative moment in America today when these issues are really going to take off. We're already seeing the movement expand. You know, the PBS series that Dick did, Michelle Obama's involvement with this. You know, we've seen, you know, on the one hand, the faltering national economy, people having to economize on their transportation with increasing gas prices, the obesity epidemic, obviously a big part of that, and just a growing awareness that quality of life is an economic engine, that businesses locate where quality of life is high. How many of you have heard of Richard Florida? He's written a great book on, I'm forgetting the name right now, but it talks about precisely these issues, how our economy is changing significantly, but having these environments that attract skilled workers, knowledge workers is key. And finally, we've heard a lot again about climate change and sustainability. So, you know, I think it's a pretty simple issue. You know, I don't know if you can all read this. The doctor is saying, what fits your busy schedule better? Exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? I think I got that from one of Dick's old presentations. No, that's not one of yours? Okay, somebody else. And finally, my shameless plug of the day is to encourage you to, if you can, to attend this conference. 1,500 people usually attend. It's an incredible opportunity to again, hear what's happening nationally and internationally. We hope to bring more examples in from Europe this next year, as well as to network with other like-minded folks on these issues. I'll end there, and I guess we're done for the day, right? Nope, I'm sorry.
If you have any cards left, because I seem to have a big stack here. But I do have a question left over from a prior panel, and that has to do with drive-through fast food restaurants. And is there, you know, given that they tend to increase air pollution, they tend to serve food that isn't necessarily healthy, what are sort of the models for decreasing or eliminating drive-through restaurants?
This is an issue I think that more communities will start to address. We've seen, as far as I know, there's only a few places that have put a moratorium or ban on fast food.
San Luis Obispo.
You did? Okay, there's one.
Years ago.
Years ago. Okay, Arcata was the other one that I was going to mention, and they actually did it for economic reasons, I was told. They actually wanted to support and encourage local restaurants. But there is a lot more discussion now, as you may have heard in Los Angeles. One of the council members there was, Jan Perry, was trying to get a moratorium on fast food restaurants in her district, which is one of the districts that has low-income population, high amount of unhealthy food. And I don't know if that ever got, I don't think it didn't get adopted, but I know that there's been more and more discussion. So we need to have, I think, more communities sort of step up and try to do that, especially around schools. I think when I was on that IOM committee, it was hard, with adults, the personal issue gets in the way a lot. But when we talk about children, it really is, we are the ones creating that environment for them. So keeping them away from negatives, I think, is obviously a key thing that we all can do, and the government can play a role in. Okay. Just one last comment. My talk was titled "Healthy Communities Through Collaboration," and I think today illustrated, just how important that collaboration is, because we've heard from all these different sectors. We saw the kinds of things that are happening already, and I guess the final word would be that, yes, we're for it. More collaboration. Thanks.
Let's have one more quick round of applause for all of our speakers today. And for our planning committee, not the planning commission, the planning committee who put this conference together. I don't have their names, but if you would all stand up, those of you who are still here, who were involved in the planning of this. Thanks. I do have, I'm going to give a few house things at the very end, but I just want to try to wrap up a blistering amount of information, some of it repetitive, which is good, because that is ultimately what we need to do, is we need to start a mantra and say it over and over and over again and louder. This is not a choice, as far as I'm concerned, to change the way we as society view what is the new infectious disease, which is what is killing our people much too young, is chronic diseases that are absolute result of the way we have chosen to build our lives. So when we hear elected officials or policymakers, decision makers, business, corporate CEOs and whatever say, we can't afford this, it will cost more money to do it this way, what business does government have? Well, I like to think of it as a reverse. No one asked us if we wanted 48-ounce size liquids, if we wanted a bike lane with no shoulder. We didn't get to make the choices of how we have developed. And I guarantee you, if you went to 100 mothers and said, here are your choices, you get to raise a child who will be obese or one who will be of a healthy weight. You get to raise a child who will get to take their bicycle to the park and not have to dodge traffic, or the opposite. Every single person would obviously pick the one that would lead their children to a healthier life. So everyone in our society wants these outcomes. We just struggle over the politics of how to get there. And it is our collective effort to do it consistently and frequently as we go forward. So there was one other thing I was going to say. That's why I'm hesitating, thinking if it will come back into my brain. In any event, I know. I was going to liken it. You hear repeatedly that this is the new tobacco control movement. And yes, absolutely, there are many models we can learn from tobacco control. But I think we need to remember that even at its peak, only half of the people were smokers. And many of them didn't want to be smokers. But 100% of us eat. 100% of us breathe the air. We all move, and we all have a stake in this. So we were able to make a lot of progress on tobacco over many years, not by, again, just the doctor saying stop it, or your mom, saying you shouldn't do this, but because a movement came into being to move progress. And it's not, I said it's very slow, but in another way, not so much. I think back to my medical school days, which is not that long ago, one generation, and the doctors were all puffing in the lounge, and the nurses were stepping over the anesthesiologist to get the last cigarette. So it really is about changing the way people think, and that if we want a better way of living, we can absolutely achieve it, and we'll be looking back the same way we look back on those things that cause laughter in the tobacco world, and wonder how we ever let someone walk out of a restaurant with a 72-gallon thing in their hands, just full of toxic sugar water. So with that, final things to tell you is on your table are the centerpieces that you should take home. You can take the gourds, you should take the seeds. There are little giftlets on the way out. They're shoe wallets, in case anyone's wondering what it is. So you can go for your run with your key or your dollar bill or what have you. For those who are getting CEUs, don't forget, and as always, most importantly, we want your evaluations. And thank you for tuning in.